San Francisco 49ers finally have a defensive coordinator. It is Nick Sorenson. Brandon Staley added to the staff as well. And the 2024 NFL Scouting Combine is over. What stood out? Who are the future 49ers that were working out in shorts in Indianapolis? All that and more coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Crocky209. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We love all the everydayers out there, and we always love it when everyone subscribes and hits the notification on YouTube and the thumbs up. And, of course, you can find us everywhere and subscribe everywhere you get your podcast. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. All right, Croc, got a defensive coordinator. They did go in-house, and it is Nick Sorenson, the former NFL safety. He was defensive backs coach, nickel specialist coach for the San Francisco 49ers. Been with the Niners for 2 years. He gets the bump up to defensive coordinator, and to replace him, double whammy. One of the other guys they interviewed for defensive coordinator, Brandon Staley, who was fired as head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers. He's going to join the 49ers, presumably in sort of a DB coach role to replace Sorenson, and then maybe even a little assistant head coach role. We'll find out exactly how these things shake out and who's going to be in the booth, who's going to be on the sideline. A lot of energy from Nick Sorenson is really the only thing I know about him. He's never called plays in the NFL, so I don't know what to expect there. I'll go through some of his resume just to get to know him a little bit better, because I know a lot of 49ers fans don't know a lot about Nick Sorenson. I didn't know a lot about Nick Sorenson before this whole defensive coordinator hiring process. Initial thoughts, what do you think about the new hires in the bump for Nick Sorenson and bringing in Brandon Staley from outside the organization?
I think it's something that's going to work for Kyle Shanahan. And we've talked a lot about Kyle Shanahan being the official defensive coordinator of the 49ers. And I think him hiring guys in-house that understand him, guys that know him being able to put his fingerprints on while help build up a guy like Nick Sorenson with how he likes to call plays, understanding situational awareness. I don't have any issues with it. He's not a veteran guy, but I think you and I both felt that they weren't going to go that route, and they found their guy in-house for whatever reason. And this was with us knowing very little about him. The only thing I knew about Sorenson was that he played years in the NFL. Like, that's how I knew him. Matter of fact, I don't even know if I knew he was really on the 49ers staff. But when I heard the name, I'm like, Nick Sorenson, former safety. So I knew who he was. But I think him just obviously having a football mind, understanding certain things, being around DeMeco Ryans, then being around Wilkes, I think gaining experience that way, and then understanding Kyle Shanahan. I like where Kyle's going with this.
You know what Kyle Shanahan loves in both Nick Sorenson and Brandon Staley? Is they're all shaped the same. He's getting together a tall, skinny coaching staff together. So Nick Sorenson listed at 6'3", 210 in his playing career. Little linebacker. He was a big safety coming out of Virginia Tech. He was, Falls Church, Virginia is where he went to high school as well. So staying in state there, going to Virginia Tech. He was undrafted in 2001. He was signed as an undrafted free agent with the Miami Dolphins, went to the St. Louis Rams from 2001 to 2002, then bounced around to the Jacksonville Jaguars, and then stuck for a few years with the Cleveland Browns as well. So Jaguars from 2003 to 2006 and the Cleveland Browns from 2007 to 2010. So already, I like the guy because you're an undrafted free agent, Croc, and the first team that signs you, the Dolphins, you don't make the squad, but you end up with the Rams and you stick there for 2 years. And then you go to a new team and you stay there for 3 years. And then another team gives you a shot and you stay there for 4 seasons in 2010. So he had a nearly decade career in the NFL as an undrafted free agent and didn't even stick with the team that signed him as an undrafted free agent. So phenomenal stuff there. And you can play a lot of special teams. You're versatile with the guy who's played some linebacker, who's played safety as well. So versatile player, ended up coaching DBs in the NFL started with the Seattle Seahawks. So he knows the cover 3 stuff they've been doing over there. And that happened a few years after his playing career was over. Seattle Seahawks started as an assistant special teams coach in 2013 to 2015, then stayed on as assistant defensive backs coach for 2016, then full-on secondary coach for 3 years with the Seattle Seahawks until 2020, then went to the Jacksonville Jaguars as special teams coordinator. So he has been a coordinator, albeit not defensive coordinator, but he was a special teams coordinator for the Jaguars in 2021. I believe that entire staff got fired. They had a lot of fired staffs for a few straight years there in Jacksonville. And then became the San Francisco 49ers the following year, defensive assistant for a year till he figured out what they wanted to do with him. And he was defensive pass game specialist and nickels coach for the 49ers last year, and now becomes defensive coordinator, presumably defensive play caller for the San Francisco 49ers. So a nice little run there. Really cool to see where these guys come from. And I don't know what to expect from Nick Sorenson, but I love the path. I love how he's stuck and how he's grinded out a career in the league as an undrafted guy out of Virginia.
I think the template for playing defensive coordinator for the 49ers is in place. You just have to understand it, see it through the eyes of Kyle, maybe interact with the kids and the players the way that Kyle sees fit and the players see fit. And I think from there, you can have a lot of success. It's a very talented defense. Obviously, there'll be some moving pieces, with free agency coming up. But I think it's a situation where if I was a first-time defensive coordinator where I'm going to get some kind of help from the great offensive mind of Kyle Shanahan, and I have all the, I got Nick Bosa, I got Fred Warner, I got guys at every level. I got all-pro cornerback with Travarius Ward, and I got, Diamador Lenore, who he's very familiar with because he played in the nickel spot. I think this is an ideal situation for an up-and-coming coordinator.
Question in the chat here from Roger says, does the Fangio system get sprinkled in? So that's the Brandon Staley side of this whole thing, Croc. And Brandon Staley is a disciple of Vic Fangio. He worked with Fangio as a secondaries coach with the Denver Broncos. And then he went to the defensive coordinator he was outside linebackers coach with the Denver Broncos under Fangio. He was with Fangio, I believe, with the Chicago Bears as well, as a linebackers coach. And he's done secondary and linebackers coach throughout his career. Northern Illinois, St. Thomas, Minnesota College, Hutchinson Community College, then Tennessee grad assistant, John Carroll, James Madison, John Carroll again. Like he hit all the small colleges and then made the jump as outside linebackers coach from John Carroll as defensive coordinators to the Chicago Bears. And then under Fangio, then went with McVay as defense coordinator for that 1 year where they were the number 1 defense in the NFL with the Los Angeles Rams. Then he got that head coaching job. So moved quickly. He went from John Carroll in 2016 to NFL head coach in 2021. So that's 5 years, which is pretty phenomenal stuff there. So he was a rising superstar and thought up to be one of the best, smartest young coaches in the NFL was Brandon Staley in his 30s when he got that head coaching job. Didn't go great for the Chargers. Now he's with the 49ers as an assistant.
Maybe a little too smart for his own good, as the head coach over in Los Angeles with the Chargers, had a really talented defense there. A lot of injuries, ups and downs that he had to deal with, but didn't quite work out. But I do have a question. Does it say anywhere on there with his Wikipedia, did he start off on the offensive side of the ball or did he play offense? I feel like I remember looking into him when he first got hired by the Rams and there was like this offensive background with him.
Everything's been defensive as a coach. Playing career, he went to the University of Dayton, played 2 years as a quarterback. He guided the Dayton Flyers, guiding them to a 16-5 record in 2003 and 2004. And he finished his playing career at Mercyhurst College. And that was in 2005. So, yeah, he was a starting quarterback for 2 years at the University of Dayton. So that's odd. Yeah, you go quarterback to defensive line coach. You don't see that very often.
Well, with coaching, guys get in however they can. So when you're just trying to make your way in, maybe somebody likes you, maybe they know you, they'll bring you on staff, but it's like, hey, you got to coach defensive line. And I used to think that was odd. I had a defensive back coach who I want to say Coach Marvin Jackson. He might listen to the podcast. So shout out to Coach Jackson. All right, but Coach Jackson was my defensive back coach my freshman year at San Joaquin Delta College, junior college in Stockton. And next thing I know, he's like coaching defensive line. I'm like, wait, why is Coach Jackson coaching defensive line? He's a DB guy. He played DB. He's a DB coach. But you start to kind of move around and figure out where you fit in. And for Staley, it ended up being on the defensive side, especially on the D-line, which is a good place to start because once you learn the front end and how they do things, I think it's a little easier to start learning the back end as opposed to going about it the opposite way.
It helps, right? It absolutely helps to know the other side of the football so you know how to attack it. So I love that. Absolutely. And look, if you know ball, you know ball. Just like Eric Crocker. Like, obviously, I trust you, Croc, when you talk corners, but I trust you when you talk offensive linemen and when you talk wide receivers, right? And especially wide receivers, because you have to know how to cover a wide receiver if you're going to be a corner, and you coach both those positions. So, yeah, I trust the ball knowers to go two-way and know both sides of the football. Next, Croc, more expectations about Nick Sorenson, what he might bring to the 49ers. Let's wrap up this combine. Some things that stuck out to us, some players who might be future San Francisco 49ers we saw working out in Indianapolis. Next. This episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props. Of course, you can bet on NHL, Major League Baseball, motorsports, combat sports, tennis, soccer, rugby, snooker, whatever it is, you can find it at FanDuel, and of course, NFL as well. Futures bets for 2024 and draft props, which is my favorite way to win a little cash every offseason at FanDuel. If you know your stuff, you get a little advantage with those draft props, in my opinion. Just stay tuned in here to this podcast, and we'll help you out there as well. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA.
Peacock.
Yeah.
If you guys saw my face change a little bit, are we getting into the combine stuff yet or not yet?
Not quite yet. I want to throw a couple things out there. Why? Is there some big news happening right now?
Well, A.D. Mitchell, you and I, we did a full-on breakdown. And full disclosure, I've been coaching, so there's a lot of things with the combine I missed. I got to watch the DBs and watch them run and everything, but I was coaching travel ball 7-on-7. So I missed a lot, and I literally just got home. But I checked A.D. Mitchell just to see, like, how did he do testing-wise? Do you know his testing numbers?
Oh, I know all the testing numbers. Yeah. Let's tease that, Croc, because that's funny. Okay. I just love the look on your face now. I think the Texas wide receivers is my favorite thing that we're about to talk about, because we did our evaluation on tape without seeing the combine. And so many things happen at the combine, and it's so important not to change those evaluations. Just a couple of quick notes here on the 49ers new coaching staff. Somebody in the chat brought up, you can't let somebody who doesn't run this system call the plays. And I kind of agree with that. And coming from the Fangio family, and Brandon Staley's always run, more of an odd front defense. I think he's a smart guy, and he would have every opportunity to learn what the 49ers wanted to do and implement that. But we saw how difficult that was for Steve Wilkes, and it didn't quite work out. So staying in-house with somebody who knows exactly the plan, know how everything fits together with Nick Sorenson, I think was the right move. And I do think that Brandon Staley's a smart guy, and some guys are better coordinators than they are head coaches. And clearly it didn't work out for Brandon Staley as a head coach. And by the way, when he did have that 1 year of NFL play calling experience with the Rams before he got the head coaching job, and had the #1 defense in the league, Croc, he had Aaron Donald, he had Jalen Ramsey, he had all the dudes. That defense had all the dudes still, right? That was the Stars and Scrubs roster before they won the Super Bowl. That was the year before they won the Super Bowl there. So yeah, and have a smart guy, Brandon Staley. One thing though that this will be funny. I would love to be on the headset when there's 4th down decisions, because Kyle Shanahan's conservative. Brandon Staley goes for everything. And if you're assistant head
Staley's coach, over there rolling his eyes,
he'd be like, "Hey, go for it.
You're punting this.
Like, shut up, Brandon."
Saw how that worked for you. Hey, 49ers have known to kind of blow some leads in big games in the postseason. The Chargers may have blown one of the biggest ones, up, 26-0 to Jacksonville?
Oh, I mean, there's so many. It was
That was
unbelievable.
the postseason, though. It was a playoff game. They were up, and Trevor Lawrence and Jacksonville stormed back. But I want to say the Chargers were up like 26-0, I believe.
Yeah, that game was unbelievable. And Roger asked if the Fangio system will get sprinkled in. I think it helps if you're around smart coaches and take some teachings that you learn from them. And the 49ers clearly trust Vic Fangio, and they had him in the building as a sort of a consultant sort of a role a couple of years ago. So yeah, I'm sure they trust him. I'm sure that was part of bringing a guy like Brandon Staley in. So some people didn't want Brandon Staley around at all. Like he's an imbecile because he was a bad head coach with the Chargers for a few years. And, I don't subscribe to that. I think it's a great hire to get a guy who's been able to rise the way he did in the NFL, and that many people respect him enough to give him those jobs and have those opportunities. Bring him in, and he's not even a defense coordinator for you. He's assistant head coach. So anyway,
I didn't mind that at all. I saw the hire, and you have somebody like him, like you talked about earlier, good football mind. It didn't work out with him as a head coach, but we have seen him have some level of success as a coordinator. And
dude, we've seen it with Vic Fangio himself. He's one of the best defensive coordinators in the league. It didn't really work out great for him when he was a head coach. Steve Spagnuolo, he's won multiple Super Bowls as a defensive coordinator. Didn't have a great run with the Rams when he was head coach either. And I think people would have made a mistake by not giving him another job after that, right, as defensive coordinator, even though he failed as head coach. So,
and we're talking about him as if he has is he going to be calling plays or something? Like Brandon Staley is not calling plays.
Nope.
I think I saw like assistant head coach maybe, but I think for Kyle Shanahan, it's just having someone else that speaks his mind and can help with game planning. That's what I'm assuming.
Yeah, help with game planning. They had to replace Sorenson. There was a hole at head coach. So essentially they replaced Wilkes with Brandon Staley, and then Sorenson stays in the building and gets the play calling job. And they're all going to help each other game plan there. Here's an interesting note. And this is one of the big notes I heard around the building, around the 49ers, why they like Sorenson. I've seen some clips of him, and he's a pretty high energy guy. It's all about the football for him. He's big on, he does this drill about getting the football. And as Ed says in the chat, Sorenson, huge fan of the peanut punch, the peanut Tillman punch. He's all about causing turnovers. And so, I don't know how that will show itself, because, he's not really working with the same position groups like he was before. He's going to be more in play calling, game planning mode, but I'm sure that'll be a big part of what he's trying to do there, and a higher energy guy. So I would imagine Sorenson's going to be on the sideline. Maybe Staley's upstairs though. He'll be the cerebral upstairs guy, and Nick Sorenson will be the on the field, on the sideline, high energy defensive coordinator. That's how I envision things going here. Combine wrap 4.3540 for AD Mitchell, Croc. And let's start with the Texas wide receivers. Let's just start wide receivers because there was some time.
Official 4.34.
Okay, 4.34. Excuse me. Sorry, Adonai Mitchell. Apologies for not giving you that extra 100th of a second there. 4.3440 for AD Mitchell out of Texas, and his teammate Xavier Worthy, your guy, Fresno, California, 4.21 combine record. I mean, those dudes can fly. And we saw athleticism on tape. We knew Xavier Worthy was fast, right? But
we said that Xavier Worthy was a rich man's Danny Gray.
Yes,
right? It was like it was the first round version, or I felt like it was first round. You said more second round. All right. And there were some people on my timeline when he weighed in, they saw, 165. Dylan Wade's going first round. Then he plays a 4.21. I did want to make it clear when I saw the 4.21. And here we go. Here's the thing that happens every year, every combine, every prospect. You want to compare him to somebody. So because he's really fast, right? He just ran a 4.21. You're going to compare him to all the fast guys and maybe a guy that's smaller, right? Instead of watching him as his own prospect. Like he's unique in his way. What does he do well? There was a reason why I was so high on Devontae Smith, right? If the analytical crowd, they attacked me, You don't see anybody that's successful at the NFL level that is 6 feet tall or taller and weighs below 180 pounds. The only other guy that was like him was Snoop Menace. Snoop Menace was not good. And it's like, dude, I don't care about Snoop Menace. I'm watching this guy as a prospect. What does he do? What doesn't he do? And if there's a problem with his weight, okay, is he getting off the ball? Yep, clean releases. They can't get hands on him. Is he attacking the ball at his highest point? Yes, he is. Is he playing through contact? Yes, he is. Is he running back? He's doing everything I need him to do, whether he was big or small. So I just like him as a prospect, regardless of his weight. We've seen his ability carry over to the NFL level. When I look at any of these guys, when I look at Xavier Worthy, he's not the prospect Devontae Smith is, but I don't dislike him because, well, he's light in the bud or whatever. Like, no, he's still a good prospect in his own right. He just might not be a Devontae Smith prospect, but he could still be better than some of the other speedsters that are underweight or undersized that people want to throw out there, like the John Ross and things like that. And I'd even go as far as say with John Ross, I don't think John Ross did not work the way they expected being a top 10 pick because of any type of lack of ability or talent. You never know what's up in here with the guys, how they prepare for games, how they catch on to a team, a scheme, and all those other things that factor into if a guy works out on this team. So I know everybody's gonna see 4-2-1 and be like, the fastest guys, blah, blah. Just evaluate and look at each guy as their own individual prospect.
You know what's crazy about John Ross? When he ran his 4.22, he was 190 pounds.
Yeah.
And Worthy was 163, was it?
165, I believe. Very light. Very light.
163, I think. Yeah. No, 165. Yeah. It's 5'11 and 5'11 at the wide receivers and the corners is these guys were a lot shorter than listed. Xavier Worthy was listed 6'1", 170. He came in shorter. Most guys gained 10 pounds. He even lost 5 pounds. Clearly, he's trying to run fast, right? He'll probably show up in 170s at his pro day and then not run or something like that. And Adonai Mitchell was listed 6'4". He was only 6'2". So they both lost almost 2 full inches off their listed height. 6'2 and a quarter, 205 with the 4.34 40-yard dash for Adonai Mitchell, the third fastest time. And LSU wide receiver Brian Thomas, 4.33, was flying too. And he's just a hair under 6'3", 209. I like Brian Thomas so far better than Adonai Mitchell. But and here's the thing. This is the big question with all this, Croc. And I'm going to catch you after the break with the answer on this one. Seeing these guys run after you watched them on tape, does it change where you have them? And should it change where teams draft these players? We'll get to that next. This episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by BetterHelp Online Therapy. A lot of us, and I know I'm really bad at it, you spend your lives wishing, I wish I had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? It's a wonderful way to look at the world. The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters most to you and help you get the most out of it and find time for that so you can do more of it. So if you're thinking of starting therapy and giving therapy a try, start with BetterHelp. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire. You get matched to a licensed therapist. And sometimes you don't hit it off with a therapist. That's okay. You can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Croc, do you think former Texas wide receiver Kyle Shanahan will draft one of those Texas wide receivers, Xavier Worthy or A.D. Mitchell, if they're there on the board at pick 31? Do you think they'll even be there at pick 31? And would you change where you would draft those guys based on seeing how they worked out after we already did their film scouting report?
Let's start with the second part of that question. And I would say, no, I wouldn't change a thing. A lot of this stuff is to either, confirm, right? Which we knew Xavier Worthy, he's fast. Like we identified that he's fast. He's an explosive player. We knew that. A 4.21, knowing he ran that, it doesn't change.
Don't double count it, right, Croc? You already knew he was fast. It doesn't matter if it's 4.3 flat or 4.21. He's fast. And the fast is on tape, and the fast is the fast, and we saw it.
Now,
The only thing is like you go back and you're like, okay, is he so fast that it's beyond what we thought of him before? And maybe you go back and peep the tape one more time and say, okay, no, we had it right.
Yeah. Now, Mitchell, I don't think it changes, but it makes me question certain things because as a coach, you always feel like you can fix this or you can fix that with this guy. Oh man, if I could just teach him this, I get him in the building, we can work on these things. We're fine. So with Mitchell and a lot of people, they start throwing out like CeeDee Lamb. And obviously he has much faster straight line speed on paper than CeeDee Lamb ever had. I feel like in games, I watched him play at a very similar speed. And if you go back some years, CeeDee Lamb was not someone I was extremely high on originally. And I had to keep watching and keep watching and keep watching. And I saw little things and I felt like some of the things he did was a little inconsistent. But once I start piecing them together, I'm like, oh, I see it. This guy is wide receiver 1. Mm-hmm. Now, I haven't done that with Mitchell yet and continue to go back. And I hate that I know his testing because it wasn't just his 40-yard dash. I mean, it was all the way around. The 40, his 10-yard split was crazy. Vertical jump, almost 40 inches. Broad jump, 11.4. Like, all those things are tremendous. I would like, from what I've seen, to see some of those things be more consistent on film. So I wouldn't change my thoughts on him yet, but maybe if I go back and I start watching, I can see things or see more of what you saw, which you said, hey, I think this guy's going to go before Worthy. I think he's going to be a first-round pick. So
I think both guys will go higher than I would have had them because of these workouts. And I think it's going to make teams go back to look at the tape, maybe find something that's not there. My question would be with A.D. Mitchell especially is how come he didn't run 4.3 on tape? How come he played like he was 4.5, right? Because CeeDee, it's funny because the two comps I've heard for A.D. Mitchell, and this was before the combine, was CeeDee Lamb. That was Brett Coleman. And we were tagged in that video, and it was interesting. I watched that video and what he thought of him. And George Pickens. You can't have two more different players than George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb. But those are the two players I've seen A.D. Mitchell comped to. And the thing that was missing in CeeDee Lamb's scouting report was the top end speed. It wasn't on film, and we've seen it in the NFL. That's not his game. So how come you run 4.35, but your comp is CeeDee Lamb? That doesn't add up because CeeDee Lamb doesn't have speed. You know what I mean? So that's really the inconsistency there with A.D. Mitchell, and I think his stock is going to be all over the place. Some teams are going to love him, some teams might not, but I think in the end he goes pretty high. But it's okay if both those guys go before 31. It's going to push down one of these offensive tackles potentially.
Right, and for the 49ers, we're talking about these two guys because we've been breaking down players. We are trying to get through the offensive line. Blame it on me that we're not a little bit further along because the Arizona offensive lineman, I was supposed to watch him Morgan.
Jordan Morgan from Arizona, yeah, and Patrick Paul from Houston. Those are our next two guys up because we've seen them mock to the 49ers at 31, so we want to get into that.
So we'll get to those guys, but we're revisiting, some of the things from the combine that jumped out, and obviously the way that the Texas guys tested, and we just talked about them on a previous episode. It made sense to kind of circle back around. I think they helped themselves, and a lot of times with the testing, it's more so about money, basically kind of your draft slot, as opposed to how much a team likes you. So if, let's say, hypothetically speaking, I know you guys, the 49ers don't need a receiver. Okay, but let's hypothetically speaking, the 49ers are like, we like the value of these guys at 31. That may not have changed, but oh man, the spot where you have to take them changed. Maybe the 49ers viewed them as a mid-second round type guy, and now, oh man, we can't wait to mid-second round and try to trade up for them. We have to snap them at pick 31. And I feel like that's what the testing kind of does for you.
I still like wide receiver more in the second round than round one. And there's plenty of offensive linemen to look at in round one, Croc, and just some phenomenal athletes out there, guys moving around that is just it's kind of crazy. The Niners aren't going to have any opportunity to draft someone like Joe Alt, who came in at 6'8" and 5'8", 321, 505 40-yard dash time, which is fantastic at his size. Really great 3-cone. And the agilities is really where it's at, short shuttle as well. And the one that stood out to me, and some of these offensive linemen, Croc, to be honest with you, is just as impressive to me as a wide receiver running a 4.2. Guys like Amarius Mims, Croc, he comes in at 6'7". Hold on, let me get the right height weight for Amarius Mims out of Georgia. 6'7" and 3/8, 340 pounds. He's got just enormous 36-inch arms. I saw a picture of him playing high school football, and it was a lot like, do you remember the Myles Garrett stuff? It's just like, this is crazy. It's inhumane to make the other kids play against a guy like this in high school. It's just unbelievable, the size difference. They're not the same species, but he had a 4.33 short shuttle, which at his size is by far the fastest of any. You have to go back to guys who are maybe just barely over 300 pounds to even find someone close to that with the short shuttle, which is one of the most important times that we've seen with offensive linemen. And so Amarius Mims, just ridiculous player. He only started 8 games in college. If we're looking at the sub 4.50 or the 4.50 range for the short shuttle, which is really indicative, especially with the interior guys, of being a really good offensive lineman in the NFL. Wisconsin center Tanner Bortolini, he also ran 4.5s, sub 4.5, no, sub 5.0 in the 40-yard dash. Tanner Bortolini, 4.28, crazy short shuttle time. As I just mentioned, Mims was 4.33. Dominic Puny from Kansas guard, 4.40. NC State center Dylan McMahon, 4.45. He was moving around really smooth in the drills. So those are the guys that killed it. And it's when we went through the 40-yard dash times, right, and how most of them are bad, it's the opposite with the short shuttle. And 300-pound offensive linemen that can run sub 5.0 in the 40, most of them are actually good. And so when I'm looking at 40s, I'm way more impressed. When I'm looking at workout numbers, way more impressed by the big ones that run like that than even the wide receivers. So I'm excited about some of those guys. Saw Troy Fotanu, who's going to be coming up for us in our scouting series pretty soon here. Saw our guy Talise Fuaga moving around really well. So there's just J.C. Latham. There is a number of offensive linemen in this draft, and I think the 49ers are going to have a chance for a good one late in round 1. I don't know which one it's going to be. I don't know if it's going to be a guard or a center or a tackle, but there's going to be some good ones. It's a really deep offensive line class.
With how Fuaga tested, did that change anything for you from the standpoint of his draft slot? It's kind of all over the place, and more of him being like a top 15 pick. But how did you feel about it?
He's going to get the guard treatment. His arms are short. That didn't change from the Senior Bowl, and that's not going to change. And he moved around well, and I'm sure some teams are going to like him, but some teams, guards will get drafted that high, but those are usually guys that have played the position already. Quentin Nelson, right? And that doesn't happen that often. So I still don't think that the guys that have sub 34-inch arms, and we're talking like 16th percentile for offensive tackles at the NFL, was 33 and an eighth or whatever it was for Talise Fuaga's arm length. And he moved around well and he looked good, but that works as a guard and a tackle all the same. And he didn't give up any sacks, I don't think, either the last couple of years in college either. They run the ball a lot, they get the ball out quick. There were reps I saw that they were sack-worthy reps, but a sack didn't happen on the play. He's a really good player. I like him. I would try him at tackle, but some teams just have a hard. It's kind of like the Xavier Worthy weight thing. It's like, if you weigh less than this amount, if you're an offense tackle, your arms are less than this amount, you don't play for us at that position. Period.
Teams have their prototypes.
Yeah,
and a lot of times they're a little bit less willing to move off of their prototype.
And I agree with Kenny. He says Fotanu had great workouts. Fail him at tackle first, great feet. And that's kind of how I feel about Fuaga as well. And I wonder what the 49ers are going to think about those guys if they have a chance to draft them late in round 1. We will get more into all this stuff. We're going to wrap up the combine. We'll talk more defensive players, more offensive players that stood out, the guys we think are the perfect fit for the 49ers that we saw working out at the combine in Indianapolis. We're going to get into the future 49ers scouting series. We'll be scouting the mock drafts as well, and have a whole bunch of new prospects to deep dive on here as we get ready for the 2024 NFL Draft every day on the Locked On Podcast Network. Appreciate everybody jumping in on the live show here. Got a defensive coordinator now, coaching staff set. Now it's time to set that draft board. Free agency right around the corner as well. We've got it all covered for you daily right here. Locked On 49ers.